Today we're at Yorktown, where America finally got to start calling its own shots. So didn't know if we'd make it to Yorktown. We went to Jamestown, and happy to be at Yorktown here. So with our recent adventures, braving, getting out to travel, wanted to spend some time at Yorktown and see if we could find some inspiration for calling our own shots, since we seem to have managed to do that, get out and go traveling. So we're going to look for further inspiration to get out, explore, and make the best of life by calling our own shots. Let's go see what we can find in Yorktown.
Access to Yorktown. Admiral Thomas Graves, commanding a British battle fleet of 19 ships of the line from New York.
So cool that these are George Washington's remaining tents. George Washington was 6'2". That's crazy. Huh.
I know. I can't believe that I did this.
Yeah. You could have touched the top of Washington's head.
I know. That's
I think,
weird.
let's see, I don't know. Let's see, Washington was born.
Was that tall?
I think I think George Washington at the time of this battle was like 49, so he's only like 4 years older than me. I have to imagine that it took a lot of courage to do something like load one of these cannons and fire it in the middle of oncoming cannon fire of your own, which there were 22 days of that here at Yorktown. So it's tough to imagine what it's like standing behind that. I guess maybe you get used to it in 22 days, but look forward to its end. So calling your own shots, making your own decisions is a big deal here in Yorktown. So we're going to use that to find inspiration to be able to think about our own lives, go out and travel, or do the things that we've always wanted to do. So this was the first Allied siege line. So this is where French and American forces began to trench out, set up batteries to overtake Yorktown. So the defense line, inner defense line, is right up there at the visitor center where we were talking, looking and checking out cannons. But here at the siege line, this was the first act, was to dig these trenches and start to build up a perimeter around the entire fort site for Yorktown. Then once an outer line was established and they went for an inner line too, I'm sure we'll get to see that one somewhere else. But this was where the outer siege line, the first siege line, was built. So here we'll see the French battery and some other artillery setups. This is where decisions were made to start getting more intelligence and creeping further and further inward until they could eventually take Yorktown. So here, this is the site of the first French battery. So let's go check it out. All right, so we're here at the first French battery along the first siege line. And the role that the French played in the Revolution, or in this role at Yorktown especially, didn't really realize how big of a role that was. I'm not much of a historian. I'm not an expert about this stuff. But the French battery was put up before the American battery, to my understanding. So the French were the first to fire from their batteries into the inner defenses of Yorktown. And then further down the line was the American battery, or the first American siege line, and then they were to fire it. And that's where Washington, supposedly the story goes, that he fires the first cannon, which lands on a table where a bunch of British officers were eating, and destroys the table. I don't know if there's any truth to that, but that's one of the cooler stories out there among the siege lines. But Washington's first decision, I'm calling the shots, to light that first cannon ceremoniously and make the first shot. If it landed on that table, and the officers' table while they were eating, that's a pretty cool story. So it's one of the more fun ones from Yorktown for sure. This is the view from the top of the earthworks in front of the siege line. And from here you can look out, you can see those cars over there. That's just in front of the inner defense line for Yorktown. So it gives you some perspective at just how far away these were. I don't know, it's probably 600 yards, 500 yards, something like that. So that's a pretty good shot for cannon bombardment. So they're just firing from here repeatedly for days on end to wear down the British. Yeah, I don't know what the differences are between these cannons, but I'm sure that was a conscientious decision. I mean, these are still resources that they're deploying, and it was difficult to get those resources here, and I'm sure they didn't exactly know when they were going to get more a lot of the time. So for Washington to be calling those shots and deciding where gunfire came from, where and what resources were going to be placed, and how we're going to use those, took a lot of conscientious thought and planning process. I think it's kind of cool that Washington, to my understanding, didn't really want to be here to start with. He wanted to make its siege on New York, and under advisement from other experienced generals, he decided they made the decision to come here to seize on Cornwallis before he got reinforcements from the Chesapeake, from the British as they came in. They were sending reinforcements up through Chesapeake Bay, and he was essentially waiting on those. They knew they didn't have time, or they couldn't risk that he was going to be able to get those resources, so they chose to seize the moment. I'm in trouble with that word today, but yeah, it means a lot to be able to take advantage of those moments and not let those pass you by. That's kind of, a place where we're at in life right now, and I'm sure everyone has those moments, but to be able to really capitalize on a moment that you have in time, take advantage of what's in front of you, get out there and have some adventures and see some things that you wouldn't normally otherwise get to see. So Washington's choices, taking advisement, listening, making conscious decisions based on the information you have, can go a long way. Okay, look, here's the difference between the guns. So you have like the long gun is the field gun, effective range 900 to 1340 yards.
That's a lot.
Fired mainly solid shots to batter down enemy earthworks, but could fire grape shots against troops too. So I'm guessing they were like, lots of balls of lead that they're just in gun range. And then mortars, effective range 670 to 1670 yards, firing explosive shells called bombs at a high angle, so they would drop behind enemy lines. So they would try and shoot behind them.
So I kind of
Something like
was
that.
right.
Yeah, you were. Very cool. And then the howitzer, which that's the one like we were talking about up front.
That's that,
And that's that stubby one that's down there. Effective range 900 to 1120 yards. Fired bombs at low velocity, medium to high angle. An American artillery officer wrote that in this siege, the howitzer are the greatest importance in firing ricochet. As a shell hops along the ground and drops just over the enemy parapet, destroying them where they thought themselves most secure. Oh, so they would try and shoot it and bounce it along and then just have it roll over the other side and explode, rather than trying to shoot it straight in.
I would shoot it straight in. I'd do that.
See, but here you can see where the French battery was, where we are now, and that's the first siege line. So that was their first line to overtake Yorktown. And then that's the inner defense line where we were earlier. So they were trying to get all the way from here to here.
Isn't that crazy? Like I said, they just make it from here, point A to point B, and they can just go.
Yeah, but then there.
This is like a lot of room.
Yeah, and then they did start an inner siege line that I think went through here. So I think we'll read about that next. So this was the second siege line. This was where forces were relocated to come closer to the Allied or the British first line of defense right there, primary line of defense. So the second siege line goes from here all the way back around to the river, or attachment to the bay. And so with batteries here within this proximity, they were now within direct firing distance for the main defense line. So we moved from the second line of the first siege line to the second siege line. That was important because now that put the primary defense line within firing range of the cannons that we just learned about. So that's why they had to make their strategic move to creep closer. So I had to imagine that took a certain level of confidence. They had to build that level of quickly, and they also did things different. This siege line was built under the cover of darkness. I think it was October 11th and 12th. So whenever Cornwallis awoke on the morning of the 12th, I guess, he was able to see that this entire siege line had been constructed under the cover of darkness. So the advantage of some serious manpower to get out here and construct the siege line, and make it something that was a formidable, really form of attack. This was an aggressive move to come in and start to approach the inner defense of Yorktown. So pretty impressive that they were able to do this all overnight. I don't know how long it is, but it's pretty impressive. Okay, we're back walking along the second siege line. We're actually at the moment walking back towards where we came from on the opposite side, but we'll turn around and we'll be walking back towards Redoubts, or Redoubts 9 and 10. But walking along the second siege line, they were able to construct this, I said, overnight, except for the last stretch of it, which ran into Redoubts 9 and 10 right here in this area. So you can see the distance from the first siege line right there where my thumb is, and the blue line would be the second siege line. So in order to get up to the second, make the siege line progress, go all the way to the water, to the bay, to fully surround the British, Redoubts 9 and 10 needed to be taken. So this is where the final battery would have been set up to hammer down and continue to wreak havoc on the British forces inside Yorktown after it was complete. But we'll go check out the Redoubts 9 and 10. This is Redoubt number 9, and Redoubt number 9, this is a reconstructed Redoubt number 9, but Redoubt number 9 was taken by the French, and so they would have come from the second siege line, which was back there, up to Redoubt 9 to take Redoubt 9 out of commission. And so my understanding was that this was all done at night, but the last 100 yards, at least, they were fairly exposed as they came forward. So they were, exposed to fire, but they came up and they would have just chopped through these wooden defenses by hand. It doesn't seem like these would have been terribly difficult to surmount, like just a couple of guys hanging on, somebody climbing up one guy to go over the next one. I don't really know, but on the other side were the British forces waiting for you. So I think I read at least one story where they came up and started hacking at these, and somebody just came over the top of the wall and said, "Who's there?" They just didn't expect the attack to happen at night, which seems kind of odd because they watched the first siege line, or the second siege line, get constructed pretty much overnight. So they knew that the American and French allied forces were willing to work at night and get things done in the dark. I'm not sure why it came as such a surprise that they would attack at night, but I think that's a good rule of thumb, to just know that people can get the better of you. If you're sitting around waiting, or you're willing to go the extra mile and do what's unexpected in order to call the shots. So this was a heck of a shot, but I can't imagine what it was like to make that run, 100-yard run, or 100 yards of sneaking through the grass. Imagine they were pretty sneaky about it, making their way up to Redoubt number 9 to overtake it. Redoubts 9 and 10 are really fascinating to me because I think that they were locations this was really where it became pivotal. Once Redoubts 9 and 10 were down, it really gave the advantage over to the Allies, and British forces kind of didn't stand a chance after 9 and 10 were gone. Their entire fort was surrounded, and the Americans and French were able to just deal a decisive blow to the forces inside the walls of the fort. But this was it had to have been like one of the hardest decisions. This was close combat, bayonet style, charging in to the redoubts to overtake the British. So it had to have been scary. I mean, Washington, I'm sure, knew that there would be losses. Everyone knew that there would be losses. Coming over from siege line 2 up to the redoubts, I'm sure that many of the men knew that they weren't going to make it back, or at least had an idea that they wouldn't. But it took bravery in a moment of uncertainty. It took a lot of trust in Washington, and these guys had to know that this was important. They were giving up relative comfort behind the walls of siege line 1 and to complete siege line 2 in order to win this before the British were able to get reinforcements. At least that was their worry, so that's what they did. So charging in the middle of the night to overtake redoubts 9 and 10 was, in my opinion, like the boldest action. It was the decisive moment. That was calling the shots for sure. I think we all get up against that moment where we can't decide what we do. We're on the fence about something, and yeah, it's just a leap of faith. And this one was calculated. So the world would be different if they didn't get it right. This is the interior of Redoubt number 9. This is what it looked like. You would have been holding ground inside this this dirt bowl, if you will. And then to the exterior, you would have found the fortified ditch or moat sort of structure with the sharpened pylons. I'm not sure what those are actually called. Maybe we'll find that out. But yeah, can you imagine just hearing some hacking out here on one of these things, coming over to the top of this wall to ask who was there, and finding all the Allied forces lined up outside of this thing ready to overtake you? Be a pretty gut-wrenching moment. It was really cool. Commemorative plaque at Redoubt number 9 in commemoration of the French soldiers and sailors who gave their lives for American freedom. This memorial is erected near the site of Redoubt number 9, second parallel of the trenches of Yorktown, captured 14th of October, 1781, American Legion Department of Virginia. So the capture of Redoubts 9 and 10 was a strategic move that, man, just reminds us, like, you get to that point, you just have to make a decision. Everything you've done up to some point becomes all for something. And I don't know, as I stand in front of the Redoubts, I think about retirement, buying a home, you know, going to travel full time, things like that. And you just have to make the decision and do it. It's you can only put so much thought and so much strategery, to quote George Bush, into it before you just have to go. So let Redoubts number 9 and 10 be a lesson to us that at some point we got to call the shots. We can prepare all we want, but at some point you got to jump over the line. And I propose a cessation of hostilities for 24 hours, and that 2 officers may be appointed by each side to meet at Morehouse to settle terms for the surrender of the posts of York and Gloucester. General Charles Lord Cornwallis to General Washington, October 17th, 1781. After 8 days of just being pounded by artillery fire, after losing Redoubts 9 and 10, the British finally surrendered after sending a drummer and an officer out to surrender. The Morehouse is where they met to agree to terms of that surrender. So, nice quiet day, probably not unlike today. We're in November, but it's a warm November day. It would have been a very, very good day to be making decisions in the Morehouse. I can't imagine what all went into this, and I know that it was still some time before we made it to the Treaty of Paris and actually gained freedom, but the negotiations that happened in the Morehouse were paramount in establishing precedent for respect. What was negotiated was the honors that would be given as the British lay down their weapons and were allowed to march away, admitting defeat, and the honors that they would or wouldn't be given and would or wouldn't give upon that surrender. It's really cool. In this wayside exhibit, it says that the Morehouse has had more than 50 owners. Of course, it was once upon a time in complete dilapidation and was restored by the National Park Service. Thank you for Cool Restoration Park Service. The Morehouse story can continue to be told, and we can continue to see what that might have looked like during a crazy time, which we think of Yorktown, we always think of the American Revolution and its role at Yorktown, but it's the Morehouse at Yorktown. But so much Civil War history as well. Was reading that the house has been damaged during Civil War, and then having pieces of it robbed to make campfires, and just had a rough life. So much history in the Yorktown area. On October 19th, 1781, and now The now paved road on your right was lined by American soldiers on the right and French soldiers on the left. Every eye was trained upon the arrival of the British troops. Spectators from miles around crowded behind the military formation in anticipation of the British parade. Washington had ordered Cornwallis to march his men from Yorktown at precisely 2 p.m., but unforeseen delays held their exit until 3 p.m. Cornwallis sent word that he was ill and appointed Brigadier General Charles O'Hara to lead his troops. In solemn step, with arms shouldered and colors cased, the British and German prisoners marched with drums beating to this field where they surrendered their weapons. The victory and the defeated were unaware that the long struggle had ended. All right, to close out, we're here at Victory Monument, but before we do that, we've got to take a quick peek behind us. As we look over the river, this is the point that they made entrance into the Chesapeake Bay. This was such an important part of the story because without French forces and ships out there in the water, we likely wouldn't have been able to hold this ground. So this was sort of what made Washington decide this was a good idea, was we had this fleet of French ships that was able to come up and close off supply ships that were headed into Yorktown to supply Cornwallis and the British. So the French were able to cut off those supply ships and battle with the British out in the water, which allowed Americans to take advantage of Cornwallis not having supplies and continuously just bombard him, knowing that the resupply and the extra troops, the reinforcements that he was counting on wouldn't make it, which was 5,000 troops and additional supplies. So we cut off that route for that to happen. They were supposed to be here within 2 days, and the French Navy allowed us to keep that from happening. So big thanks to, that's one thing I've really learned in my trip here to Yorktown, is how much of a role the French played in the American Revolution and the victory here at Yorktown. So cool part of the story. We can't do anything without friends. So that should be a big lesson these days. We need alliances, and we need strength around the world to be good partners in good things. So let's go check out Victory Monument. All right, so it's not the Statue of Liberty, but it is Victory Monument here at Yorktown. So to close out our video, we've got to see the place that marks commemorative celebration. It symbolizes our victory at Yorktown. It represents everything that went into the American Revolution and the turning point that is Yorktown. It celebrates the sacrifices that were made that day and the perseverance that we had as a young country to call our own shots. I hope it stands as a symbol. It certainly does to me that it's good to call your own shots. You have to be decisive. You have to be strategic. Sometimes you just have to say, you know what, I admit defeat, and I can still call my own shots. My favorite thing of all of this has been, I really expected to walk out of Yorktown with this high impression of George Washington, which I do. It's an amazing story, but Cornwallis is, I think, the kind of unsung, Cinderella story of it. Maybe is, I think he expected to walk away from Yorktown feeling defeated and beat down and embarrassed. But that's not what he got. He was welcomed back with open arms into Britain, and went on to be knighted and do good things for his country. So his career didn't end. Nothing happened, that really set back his own personal life, despite calling shots in a major battle that he didn't win. I think that that's a really cool thing to think about, and how you can be put in charge, you can have confidence, and you can be making the right calls, but it doesn't guarantee anything. But things may not turn out like you thought, but they can still turn out pretty cool. I mean, the dude got knighted, so that's a victory, I would say. So that's it from Victory Monument in Yorktown. Let's go have some fun and continue on and see some of America's greatest treasures, museums, city parks, and fun places on You Name It Adventures. So like, follow, subscribe, do your thing. We hope we'll see you out there on some future adventures. Let's go get them.